Welcome. We're happy to greet you at another of our Founders Forum. Tonight we are going to learn a lot about, and we're honoring Ken Carter and his wife Imagene Abbott Carter, and we're just really pleased to have them here. Don Montgomery, director of the museum, is going to be our moderator tonight, and we will continue with that. We would like to tell you that we have these meetings as an honor to those people who have been influential in the development of our area. And we have them recorded, and so they are on record so that through the years they can be enjoyed later. And we have Don Montgomery to thank for that too. He's been very instrumental in establishing and collecting a lot of these historical discussions. So we'd like to turn the time over to Don. Don, take it away.
Thank you. It's good to be here, and it's good to have some time to talk with the Carters. I'd like to start out by asking Imagene to give us a little history about your family background, your parents, grandparents, and perhaps some other ancestors that you recall that helped settle the Virgin Valley. So Imagene first, and then we'll give Ken the same question.
Well, I am the daughter of Lyman Boyd Abbott and Lydia Knight. Both my mother's father and mother were born in Mesquite. Both my father was born in Mesquite. I was born and raised in Mesquite. And my grandmother, Knight, lived here until she was 99 and never left Mesquite. So that's kind of the history of our family. My grandfather, Walter Hughes, whose home sit right where this building is, was the shoemaker and the coffin maker. Most of my family were farmers and ranchers, and that's how they made a living.
Okay.
I was not born in Mesquite. I was not born in Mesquite, but my mother was. And my grandfather, Hughes, was born in Bunkerville. On my grandmother's side, she was a bowler. She was born in Gunlock, and the family moved here when she was a very young girl. She was raised, most of her years were here in Mesquite also. I was born in Hawthorne, Nevada. My mother, as a teenager, went to Hawthorne to help her grandmother, who was a widow, grandmother Hughes. And while she was there, helping with her grandmother with her motel, as it was, met and married my father, and I was born in Hawthorne. In 1947, my father died in a fishing accident on Walker Lake. And consequently, she moved my sister and I and herself back to Mesquite when I was 8 years old. I was, of course, raised here in Mesquite. I graduated from high school in Bunkerville, the last graduating class in Bunkerville, before the high school was moved to Mesquite. I went to College of Southern Utah in Cedar City, and consequently moved to Las Vegas, and we lived there for 14 years before we moved back to Mesquite in about 1975. Except for the 36 months that I lived in Cedar City, and the 10 years that I lived in Hawthorne, all the rest of the time I've been in Clark County. And except for the 14 years when we lived in Las Vegas, I've lived in Mesquite. which totals about 45 years that I've lived in Mesquite, most of my life. I'm 46. No. Anyway, a good share of my life I've lived in Mesquite. I love Mesquite, and I've certainly enjoyed the heritage that my family has had here in this beautiful city. On my grandmother's side, as I mentioned, she was a bowler, so the Hugheses and the bowlers, of course, have always had a lively presence here in Mesquite.
Thank you. As I think about your ancestors, Imagene, I'm prompted to ask about how you're related to Will and Abbott and his wife, whose statue is out along Mesquite Boulevard. Could you tell us about your family connection to them? No. Yeah, we'll have to research that at the museum.
We will.
Okay, that's all right. Ken, you've recited some of the childhood memories you had and growing up, and you mentioned that you were among the last to graduate from the high school in Bunkerville when it closed down in 1958. Imagene, were you in that same class, or were you?
I was.
The same?
Yes,
Okay.
I was.
Do you have any memories about that last year of high school over there you'd like to share with us?
Well, the one thing I do remember is it was at the time of the testing out at the test site, and so they would take us out on the ball field and let us watch the mushroom as it came over, and I remember the bell being in the tower, the boys always ringing the bell and getting in trouble for that at night, you know, and stuff. And
You refer to the mushroom, that was the atomic testing that
yes,
was on it.
it was.
Could you tell us about how it was to see that effect and what happened to the people in the valley that you recall that either had suffered from it or any warnings they gave you at the time?
I don't remember very many warnings. I just remember them taking us out on the football field and watching the mushroom come over. Sometimes it dissipated, you know, most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And we never felt any ash or anything from it, like I have heard some others say that they did.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think we ever missed one.
Uh-huh.
We were always out right in the open watching them.
Was that your recollection too, Ken, about the mushroom cloud? Do you remember seeing it?
Yes, it was when I was in elementary school. I remember it. We'd sit on the, they'd take us out to the tennis court behind the old gym, and we would look that direction, and we would see the mushroom and feel the vibration.
Now,
Of course, they weren't at the same time, of course, but
at that time, Bunkerville was still on the main highway, as I recall.
was.
Tell us about what you recall about that old highway going through town as opposed to today, if you remember having any memories of that.
Yeah, in fact, I was going to bring that up. If we look at a map of Mesquite, which is, as you can see there, all those green things are golf courses, I think. And on both sides of the freeway, you have communities. Basically, there's in Mesquite now about 8 communities. You have let's make sure I got it correct here. Oh, that's right. You have 4 or 5 individual communities up here north of the freeway, including Sun City. And you have all these homes around Falcon Ridge, that area. You have all these around this golf course, on up here around by the airport. You have down past Casablanca, that community there. You have the old, what we call the old section of Mesquite. And anyway, that's now. And a lot of streets, a lot of individual type communities. The highway you're referring to, of course, is you take the freeway, starts at the Arizona line and comes down through Mesquite. Now, the old highway would come down hillside to Mesquite Boulevard or Sand Hill down to Mesquite Boulevard, straight across to Riverside across the Bunkerville Bridge and on down around through Riverside, up the side of the mesa, and across the mesa. This is all, of course, pre-I-15.
Mhm.
And if you look at the streets that were in existence then, this is them. This is Mesquite, as I remember, back around 1950. This being the Arizona, or the old Highway 91, which comes down to Mesquite Boulevard, across. This little turn right here is where it bends around the corner to hook into Riverside and straight down Riverside, across the bridge and so on. This little section right here is Bolsford Lane and Levitt Lane and Smoky Lane right there. This little notch you see right there was a little road off from the main road going over to J.L. Bowler's house. He lived right on that little spur. This little road right here was a little lane that went off from Mesquite Boulevard, which helped service all these fields. Keep in mind at that time, all this was alfalfa fields, wheat, barley, milo maize, sugarcane, as was all this area down here also. Mesquite was basically a farming community. A good number of little dairy barns, alfalfa fields, and that's how most people made their living. That's what Mesquite was thought of, was as a farming community. There were a few businesses along Mesquite Boulevard. There was 2 grocery stores, J.L. Bowler's department store and D's Market, which is where the present,
Golden West.
Golden West. Same footprint as the old D's Market. There was 4 cafes. There was Vonda's Cafe, which was a chalet. There was Faye's Cafe, which sits right in the middle of City Hall block here. Across the street where Waite Insurance, there was a little cafe called the Travelers Cafe. And down where Final Details is, that same building was the Freezer Cafe. So we had 4 cafes, 2 stores, several service stations, a few motels, and a lot of cows and a few people. Population-wise, we're talking right in around 1950, probably 300 or 400 people in Mesquite, which wasn't, they stayed pretty consistent through the years. The population in Mesquite, in fact, in 1984, when it was incorporated, was 606. Mesquite, in case you're not aware of it, was literally formed by an act of Congress. We were, of course, a township in the county. There was a lot of unrest with the county as far as building permits and such. But we couldn't meet all the warrants to become an incorporated city with so few people and so few businesses. So literally, by an act of Congress in Washington, D.C., a enactment was added onto some other legislation forming the incorporation of Mesquite, Nevada, which was ratified by a local district judge, and Mesquite became a city in 1984, July of, if I remember right. And the rest is history as far as the city itself is concerned, from 1984.
Okay. And hooking onto that, one of the notable highway patrolmen or policemen in town was Sheriff Abbott. Imagene, you want to tell any stories about Sheriff Abbott? And is he a relative?
Well, he's a cousin, and there's a lot of stories around about Oscar Abbott, and
Old Eagle Eye.
yeah, called him. And it's interesting because at the time we were growing up as teenagers, I don't remember curfew as such, but our parents, of course, had curfew hours that we needed to be home at a certain time, and so we would always swing by the Vonda's Cafe that had the big clock in the window, which, you know, you could shown up at night and check the time out. But I remember one particular story about Oscar, and it includes Ken's stepfather, Bill Jones. Some kids were having a sleep out, his Beverly and some of her friends were having a sleep out on their lawn, and some of the boys decided it'd be good to douse these girls, and so they did. And of course, when they got up there and doused them, it was not Beverly and her friends that were sleeping out there, it was Bill's daughter and her husband, which caused quite a ruckus. And so he went immediately and got Oscar Abbott out of bed and said, I want those boys caught tonight, you know. So Oscar went all over town trying to find them, and they kept ditching him, and I think by 5 o'clock the next morning, everybody gave up because they could not find those boys.
Now, in those early days, perhaps around 1950, when Ken was showing us the map, tell us, if you remember, how you made a telephone call back then.
I was actually my folks run a telephone office right in the front of our house, which is the old Mickelson home down by the La Mesa. And I remember as a girl sitting there, putting the little prongs into the phone when it rang, and then putting the next one over to and asking, you know, what number they wanted, and then plugging it in and ringing the thing to make the connection. So
this is before the dial phone then.
Oh, yeah.
yes, oh, definitely, definitely.
The
Payphones, we had a few payphones up and down the street
phones that were in the homes at that time were
on the wall.
on the desk. It was a wooden box, about the size of a cigar box, maybe a little bit taller, with a crank on the side.
And the crank alerted the operator you wanted to.
The phone
Caller.
did not have a dial on it. It was just a plain front with the regular headset. You would, to make a call to anywhere in Mesquite, you would crank one long, which would connect with the operator. You'd ask the operator who you wanted to talk to, either by number or just by place, and she would plug in. The phones were party phones. A few people had private lines, but most of us had either a 2-party line or a 4-party line.
We have a receipt, yeah.
Yeah, and the phone book that you're probably going to mention was a piece of cardstock, an 8 by 10 piece of cardstock, folded in half, and that had all the numbers on it. And according to which number you had, of course, your might be 2 shorts, or a long and a short, or 2 longs and a short. The operator would dial that, and if it was your number, you'd pick it up.
Right.
Along with everybody else that heard that on the line.
We have an old receipt from the Hughes and Frainer's store.
Yeah.
And it says next to phone, it says 2 shorts.
Right.
That's their
Exactly.
phone.
So it's possible, while you were in a conversation on the telephone, you'd often hear little clicks. That was people either picking up or sitting down after they'd listened or before they listened to your. You could actually have 8 people talking on the same party. That's why it was called a party.
So when you had illness in the family, did you go see Bertha?
We did have a doctor on and off during pre-Bertha times.
Oh.
I remember there was one physician, I think his name was Dr. Gilbert, who came and who made house calls because he didn't have an office. But if you were sick and needed a doctor, he would come to your house with his little satchel. I remember because he came to treat me when I was about 9 years old, and I had measles and pneumonia at the same time. I remember Dr. Gilbert coming. Of course, he was superseded by Bertha Howe, who was hired by the county to operate the hospital up here. A lot of people were born in Mesquite in that hospital.
I remember going and seeing Bertha at the hospital. And then my younger brother, Perry Abbott, was born at the hospital here in Mesquite.
So that brings back some memories.
Yes. Yeah.
As you think back to that time when Mesquite had less people, there were some, of course, significant events that still went on, the holidays. You have any recollections of any of the special celebrations that stick in your mind as special? Christmas, 4th of July, anything like that was special?
There were several special annual events that we always looked forward to. One was the New Year's Eve dance put on by the Lions Club, especially if it was on a Saturday night, because we'd go and watch all the celebrating and those who got drunk and so on, and how they acted, and see how many of them showed up at church the next day. We had John Deere Days, which was a big event. Once a year, the John Deere company would put on a little show, movie and raffle and such, and the whole community usually came out to that. The Clark County Fair was, Mesquite was the home of the Clark County Fair for years and years. Fairgrounds was on the, where the community college is right now. They had a big rodeo arena right there, and a lot of empty space for exhibits. On the street across from where Dave Tate lives, there was some pens and coops for rabbits and chickens. And the school bus garage was there, the little water tower. And of course, the elementary school was down on the corner next to the gymnasium, which is still there. So we had John Deere Days, the Clark County Fair, New Year's, of course, 4th of July, it was a big thing. That's the ones I remember.
Imagene, any special Christmases come to mind?
Not that I can really recall. The only thing I can remember is getting in, we would always have a hayride and go Christmas caroling. We made baskets and took them to those less fortunate, you know, and handed out baskets and sang to the widows and that as we, but it was always on a hay wagon and sang.
So as you were growing up in the community, besides Sheriff Abbott, any other community leaders that stick in your mind as special to you?
Of course, the church was always strong that time, so naturally the bishops were important people. J.L. Bowler was always a influential person in the city, the town. Interesting, J.L. Bowler, of course, had Bowler's Department Store, which was the original Mesquite Walmart. Anything you wanted, you could get at J.L.'s. And if he didn't happen to have it, it would be there by Monday. And it usually was if you wanted to. But you could get, along one wall was the grocery section. Across the back was the meat department and the vegetables. And everything between from one end of the store to the other was the department store. Shoes, clothes, sewing notions, farming implements, hardware, everything. And keep in mind, it was half the size of the original building right now. You can actually see where the building was doubled at one time. But Jails was a very interesting place. I always blamed him for me being in debt all my life, because that's where I got my first indebtedness, was at JL's.
Now, people tell me they used to barter with him too.
Well, I was just going to say I was passing the newspaper that time, the Evening Review Journal, And my dad would run me around in the car, always around sunset or so, when the Greyhound bus would drop the papers off and at the service station. I'd get in the car with my stepfather, and he would run me around from one end of town to the other, of course, with delivering the newspapers. One day, he and my mother went to Las Vegas, and come time to pass the papers, and they weren't back. And I, of course, walked up and down the sidewalk there in front of the service station, which was down by Harley's garage. And I had to get my newspapers passed, and he wasn't there to take me around, so I walked up to J.L. Bowler's department store, and of course in the window was a big Schwinn bicycle with a basket on the front. And it was close to closing time, about 6 o'clock. And J.L. was in there checking out the register and such, and so I went in and told him, I says, I need to buy that bike in the window. He says, oh, well, that's no problem. So we went and lifted it out and set it on the floor and kicked the tires, made sure they were up, and I says, I don't have any money. He just kind of smiled and he says, well, you can charge it. Mm. So he had me sign my name on a ticket. I think it was $49.95 probably about that time. And I took the bike out of the store and went down and got my papers passed. By the time I finished, my folks had still not got back, but I was just so proud. I put that bicycle right out in front of the house with the lights so they could see it as soon as they got there. Mm-hmm. So anyway, that was my first charge account, and I've had one ever since somewhere.
Were there any unusual climatic conditions such as floods or storms that really impacted the valley?
Well, I just from my grandparents' journals, if we go back that far, my grandpa Thomas Edward Abbott and my grandmother Priscilla was living right down here at Abbott Wash at the side of it. My grandpa had purchased a little piece of property in there, and when they put a tent up with the wooden floor, and my grandma had just gathered her clothes off of the clothesline and laid them across her bed, and this storm hit, and it picked up their tent and everything in it, and the tent ended up in the cottonwood trees right that was along the river or the wash bank, and their belongings went everywhere, and they were left without anything. And she records that they went out across the sand and the hills looking and gathering what they could of their belongings, and then they of course had to move in with his parents until they could get their tent rebuilt. But at that time in her journal she called it a cyclone, which was followed by a flood down the wash. So not only did the cyclone hit them, but the flood completely took their land away.
Yeah, rainstorms in every summer were something to behold. Because literally they would fill up the wash, the town wash and the Abbott wash, both from bank to bank up to the road, Mesquite Boulevard, and of course wasn't called that then, but and sometimes would overflow from bank to bank over the roadway. We looked forward to those July and August thunderstorms because we knew that those washes were going to run, and a lot of fun to play along the banks and watch the water go by.
Now, the Quail Creek Dam burst in the late 1980s, I recall. Do you remember anything about that event?
Oh yeah, that was of course much later, and not during the 50s, but when the Quail Creek Dam broke in by St. George, it threatened Littlefield. It took a lot of land away from Littlefield and right up to the edge of some of the homes along there. I don't think it got up quite that far here in Mesquite. Not as bad as the two storms we've had since then that impacted the homes along the river. But certainly floods have always been a big thing until they got the detention dams and the canals lined, which they are done today, which don't have that problem anymore.
Okay, thank you. How did each of you earn a living in Mesquite?
Well, I started working with my dad, who worked at a place called Alvy Colton's service station, and it was up close to beyond where Tates live, up in there. And he pumped gas, and I worked inside just over the counter selling soda pops and stuff like that. And then
Is that where Walgreens is now?
yeah. And then later, my dad was cooking at the Freezer Cafe, and so as a young girl, I worked at the Freezer Cafe, and then I also spent about 20 years working at the Chalet. So
I remember that Mesquite, besides being a farming community, was a natural truck stop area. Halfway between Los Angeles and Salt Lake, a lot of your trucks would use Mesquite as a turnaround for their trips. And through the years, there's been literally along Mesquite Boulevard here, lots of service stations that have come and gone. And right now, in fact, I think there's probably, 7 service stations in Mesquite right now. At any given time in Mesquite's history, there's always been 6 to 8 to 10 service stations along the boulevard. I worked service stations when I was a teenager. Worked through the years, even after I was married, I worked service station, and it was quite a thing. Of course, Mesquite was, through the years, if you ask anybody if you're on a trip or something like that, you'd mention Mesquite, and they would say, "Oh yeah, we went through there, we broke down." Or our car overheated, or whatever the case might be. We had a grade going up the Arizona Strip, another grade going up out of Riverside up onto the Mesa. And cars then had a natural ability to heat up, so they would stop in Mesquite and make sure they had a water bag in front of the radiator, which helped heat them up even more. But we sold a lot of water bags, at least. Anyway, I worked service station, and if you were to rebuild all those service stations that have been along Mesquite Boulevard, there'd probably be over 20 of them. There was a service station out on the middle of the Mesa, one at Riverside, of course. On down towards Vegas, you had a service station at Crystal, one at Dry Lake. In Mesquite, you had the first service station coming from Las Vegas would have been Ren Knight's little service station across the street from Final Details. Then on up a couple blocks, you had Heber Hardy's little service station. You had, of course, Mark and Leo Hardy had a service station where right on the corner of Willow and Mesquite Boulevard. The corner service station, that was a 76. And as she mentioned, Alvy Colton's service station, Rainbow Service up on the end. And of course, Archie Hughes' station down in the middle of town.
Now, later on, you went to college and got into the education business. You want to tell us about that?
Yes, I majored in elementary education when I went to college. That wasn't my original intent, but that's how it turned out. I was going to go to Utah State when I graduated, but I couldn't afford it, so I decided to go to Cedar City for a couple of years and then transfer to Utah State. So I went to my first year of college, got married between my first and second year. Still couldn't afford to go on up. So we stayed the full 4 years at Cedar City, and the only degree they offered 4 year at that time was elementary education. So instead of being a engineer, I was a school teacher.
Mm-hmm. Okay. As the years passed, you mentioned the incorporation of Mesquite in 1984, and that was the time, I believe, when Jimmy Hughes was elected as the first mayor of Mesquite.
Yes, he ran against J.L. Bowler, and I think his name was Art Lawful or something like that, who owned the corner bar at that time.
Now, Jimmy served 2 terms, as I recall.
6 years.
6 years. And then following him was Mayor Lee.
Correct.
And then tell us from there, you were on the council soon after that or during that time?
I was on the council from 1991 until 1994,
Okay,
3 years.
Tell us about the transition from council to mayor.
And then I was appointed mayor. I was mayor pro tem, and when Bill Lee was forced out, and I was appointed by the council to finish his term. And then I was elected mayor the following year. Mm-hmm. So I was on the council for 3 years and as mayor for 5 years. That was during the time when Mesquite was really in its high growth period. Mesquite during the late 1990s was officially the fastest growing small city in the United States, with up to a 42% growth every year.
And during those years that he was on the council and the mayor's chair, Imagene, what are your remembrances about what was going on then?
I just remember him being extremely busy. And I was very proud of the way that the mayor and the councilmen worked together for the growth of the city. You know, at that time I was excited about maybe having a doctor, having all these, you know, things that we had never had in Mesquite. And so it was a very exciting time, I think, to see the growth and the development and see how well they did with planning that.
And during those years, of course, in the late or the mid-'70s, I think the interstate highway was finished through Mesquite. And that surely brought a change to the way the growth of the city developed from there. Do you have any remembrances of the interstate coming through?
Certainly, as the interstate came through Mesquite, of course, originally during the late 50s, 60s, when it was still being built on both sides, people were concerned that when the freeway bypassed Mesquite, that Mesquite would dwindle and become a ghost town. Of course, it proved wrong on that count. But as Mayor Jimmy Hughes and Bill Lee and myself, all of us during our times, we realized that in order for Mesquite to prosper and for the citizens to have what they needed as far as services, we had to have population, and we had to have a well-planned community. So through the years, all of the councils have been very effective in realizing that, first of all, if you have growth, it has to be very well planned, and wide streets and street lights and zoning and all these things which incorporate a good city. And it has been very successful as far as that. A lot of people didn't like at first the fact that you had to do this and you had to do that and you had to have this in your plan before you would be approved. A good example would be on the other side of the freeway when we were, that was before mine, but when they were planning those streets, the plans insisted that the streets be wide streets. And people can understand why they had to be such wide streets out in the middle of the desert. The other side, but certainly we can see now the wisdom in making those. Same thing goes with sidewalks and street lights and things like that. Mesquite has always, through the years, no matter who is mayor, has been very well planned and has been successful as far as very beautiful community.
And businesses have developed through the years, and the economy, of course, was rather strong at that time for Mesquite because we had the growth. But
The original master plan for the city of Mesquite was for approximately half of the population to be on each side of the freeway.
Mhm.
And that's, I think, pretty well what it has stayed.
Well,
Realizing that today, as we look and as we drive through Mesquite, you see that at least 90% of everything you see wasn't here before 1984.
25 years, 26 years now.
Right.
27, I guess, to be exact.
Interesting, I was thinking as I was kind of going through from one end of town to the other as far as where businesses used to be and how they've changed. The telephone office, for instance, is in the same place it always was, of course, but at that time it was just a very small little one-room building. There's only one business that I can think of that is in its original place with its original name. Anybody know what that is? We have a lot of the old buildings that are still there, but they've had different uses and different names through the years. For instance, the Vonda's Cafe. It wasn't the museum then, though, was it? Same location, same name. And you can think of all the old buildings that are still there. The Final Details, that's an original building. Chalet Cafe, original building. A few other examples of that, but I won't give away the answer. But no, the State Line Casino. No, that used to be, that was the original D-Nail Motel. Yeah. Right. Same building, though. Yeah. Hardee's Deluxe Hotel. It's not called Hardee's Deluxe Motel anymore. Isn't it the DV?
Mm-hmm.
Hardee's, that's two of them, I'm sorry. Hardee's Garage, but it's not in operation, but up until it closed, it would have been the second one. But it's close to there. Desert Palms Motel.
Desert Palms.
Desert Palms Motel has always been the Desert Palms Motel, and it's still there. The only difference is Phil Abbott used to have his house right there by the store, and they moved it down to the end of the block where the Greens live now.
As you reflect upon these ups and downs of the economy and the stores, you have any hopes and wishes for the city at present as far as growth?
I always thought it was to be very nice for Mesquite to be in a position someday where you didn't have to go out of town for anything unless you wanted to. Back in the time that we're talking about, the two grocery stores, we had no pharmacies, no dry cleaners, no a lot of things like that. Basically no doctors, no dentists, no chiropractors, nothing like that. And literally most everything you needed, you'd have to, except for groceries, you'd have to go to either St. George or Las Vegas to get.
And the road was a 2-lane road back in those days.
Yeah. But we've come a long ways, and today we have, of course, the hospital and Walmart and dry cleaners and dentists and all those things that I just mentioned we didn't have then. As far as what we still need, I suppose if I needed brain surgery, I'd still have to go out of town, which I may need. But for most other services, I think we've reached that point where 90% of what we need or what we want or what we should have or could have, we can get right here in Mesquite, and that's good.
That's good.
You have to have population to support services.
Mhm.
And people used to ask me, they say, does all this fast growth bothers a lot of people? Does it bother you? And I say, no, because unless we have the population, we can't have all the services.
Mhm.
That's important for any community.
Very true. Well, I'd like to turn some time over to the audience. If you have anything you'd like to ask Imagene or Ken, now's your chance. Okay, while they're thinking, in case you have anything, just kind of call it out. I'd like to ask Imagene if she has any other memories of perhaps the cars you had, or when you were young, were there still other ways of getting around town besides a car, or was there any horses and wagons in use back in those times?
That's all we had. That's all I can remember. And back in those times, you know, it was years before my family owned a car. I think there were a few around, but as far as running water in the houses and stuff like that, we didn't have that for, you know, a few years, because when I was a child growing up. I can remember when the first telephones came in, of course, and then first televisions, but our family was one that didn't own a television until I graduated from high school.
You went to the movie theater.
We did. The Edward Theater.
Tell us about the Elwood Theater.
It was owned by Mike Burns, and we could go to a matinee on Saturday and buy us a drink and popcorn and candy and everything else for 50 cents. It was up by where Morris's?
Near the Golden West Casino?
Right, just on the other side of the Golden West, I think.
Between the Golden, it was on the north end of the Golden West parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
And it was there for a lot of years after it closed down.
Mm-hmm.
But Mike was always there,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and he would take the tickets, start the movie, sell the popcorn, and he was a one-man show, as I remember it.
Happened to be the father of
Yes.
Yes.
Oh.
Yep. That's where the interest in the movie theaters has always been in the family. Mike Burns was a very interesting character. He had also a little service station right on the front end of that same parking lot for years. He had the service station, he had the theater, and he was also, for some time, a highway patrolman. And he got into the station business with his association with Highway Patrol, opening a truck stop down at Cross Street, final details at that time. But as far as the movie theater, he was a very interesting character. Of course, the concession stand there in the theater had the bottles pop, the 10-ounce Coke bottles and the 12-ounce RC bottles, 9-ounce Nesbitt Orange, and M&Ms and popcorn. And we would like to take a package of M&Ms and pour it into a big bottle of RC and shake it up. Or as you drink it, of course, drink the cold M&Ms along with the RC. But anyway, when you finished your bottle of pop, you would, of course, sit it down on the floor, and very often it would get kicked over and start rolling down the aisle and hit the metal seats as it went by and make a lot of noise. And one night we were in there, right in the middle of the movie, a pop bottle got kicked over and started rolling. You could hear it rolling down, 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 all the way to the bottom. And all of a sudden, the lights came on and the movie stopped, and Mike Burns come storming down the aisle all the way to the front and turned around and says, "Who rolled that bottle?" Of course, nobody was going to admit to it. And he smiled and he says, "First time one's ever gone to the complete bottom. Congratulations." Anyway, that was back to the social events of the, when we were growing up, the movie theater, of course, was one of the prime social events. So we look forward to going to the movie. As far as television is concerned, I well remember the first television coming into the valley, and that was probably in about 1956, thereabouts. They brought a portable television set up in the middle of an alfalfa field up here down at the bottom of the water tank hill. And the whole community came out to see that television in operation. They ran a wire or an antenna or whatever from the water tank all the way down across the ditch into the middle of that alfalfa field, and had a generator to power it, of course, and kicked on Channel 8 out of Las Vegas. And that was the test, and a lot of people signed on to it and bought television and paid $1 a month to, along with their water bill, to support the booster tower. Mm-hmm. We only had the one channel, Channel 8, which for years was, of course, we didn't know anything better, and that was good stuff. Beverly Hillbillies and Route 66 and all those good shows.
Well, to those people who were relatively new residents of Mesquite, could each of you just give them some thoughts about what their life is now, what they can look forward to as they settle into this area? Something they could connect with, perhaps, about living here?
Well, I think that's been said through the years in different mottos and things of who's ever in the council that time. You know, when I was mayor, the pet saying was Mesquite, a diamond in the desert. Mm-hmm. And now it's something to the effect of live here for a while and live here forever, whatever it is. Mesquite has always been a place where a lot of people drive through and turn around and come back and say, "Oh, this is a nice place," and they end up staying here. Or they're a snowbird for a few years and they become a permanent bird here. As far as, you know, the economy of the time, of course, has hit everybody in the whole state, but we can feel good about the fact that Mesquite is vibrant and maintaining. And as far as growth is concerned, we master planned for 50,000 on the regional master plan. We're not quite there yet, so.
We do have a question out here. Yeah, the question was, how many principals did you serve under as you were in education, and about the changes in education over the years?
Okay. I was a classroom teacher for 7.5 years in Las Vegas under a couple of principals. I decided to switch over to library science midstream, and I was a librarian for the 21 years in Las Vegas and in Mesquite. As far as how education has changed, I don't think it's too drastic. The school district has always been very dominant as far as the purposes of education, and hopefully the fact that education is important in everybody's life, no matter whether they're kindergarten or high school. The county is, I think, has always treated Mesquite relatively well. As far as I've been able to ascertain, it's, of course, the schools have changed a lot. When back in the 50s, of course, we only had the two schools. We had the elementary school in Mesquite and the high school in Bunkerville. Probably about
Yes.
100 students in each one, and now we have four schools and a couple thousand students probably total.
I was just going to say, like in our graduating class, there was 18. What was it this year? 200 and something, I believe they said, in the graduating class.
Okay, was
Maybe
there any,
more than that.
any others? Question? Okay, we have one here.
Well, we have the patron you've been when was the library?
Okay, the Mesquite
There's-
Library question. Yeah.
There's always been a library in Mesquite. Always has. It was originally it was a part of the elementary school. The community was always welcome to borrow library books out to the school library. Even when high school was in the old location, it was always part of the community library, vice versa. For some time, the library was in City Hall, downtown. And see, it was in the back of the auditorium in the original elementary school, a separate room in the high school in Mesquite, in City Hall. Then, of course, it's in its present location now, which I was very pleased to hear that they're going to enlarge that.
Now, in the 1940s, early 40s, for a short time, there was a library in the current museum building, too.
Yes, that's true. I forgot about that one. Yeah.
No, 1941 to early 1942, the present museum building served as a library for several months before being converted to a hospital.
I was thinking just a few minutes ago when you asked us how we would, with newcomers coming into our valley and into Mesquite, we had a young man from Salt Lake visiting us over the holiday Thanksgiving, and he was totally amazed with Mesquite. And he was standing at our window looking out, and he says, "This is just a paradise in the desert." And I think that says it all. It's just, that's what Mesquite is to most of us, just a paradise.
With that observation, I think it's a great way to end our visit with you tonight, and we thank you, Imagene and Ken, for your
Thank you
time.
for having us.
And thank you very much.